So for this paper, it says you are provided with a solid X and a solution Y. Carry out the following experiments. Carefully record your observations. So here it doesn't say anything about testing for any gas involved. So all you need to do is carry out the following experiments. So for part A, we are testing on solid X, and they ask you to hit the test tube strongly until no further changes are observed. This means it is looking out for decomposition. So you need to state what color change was there. So green to black. Okay, so you need to say the color before and the color after. Okay, next, test for the gas involved with lime water. So when we see lime water, we are thinking of carbon dioxide gas. And if there is carbonate ion present in this solid X. So if carbon dioxide is present, a white precipitate is formed. So this is part A on solid X. We can conclude that solid X has carbonate ion due to the carbon dioxide gas produced. Okay, so next, how do we know how many observations to write down? We look at the marks. So the previous one was 2 marks. Okay, so now for part B, part 1, we're talking about solution Y. So from here onwards is all about solution Y. So this test is a test for cation, and it says add dropwise until a change is observed. Doesn't say anything about until no further changes. So all you need to do is write about the green precipitate forming. Do not need to write about the soluble or insoluble in excess. Okay, next, allow to stand for a few minutes. And what you should see is the green PPT becoming a red-brown PPT. So if it's a green PPT, you should think about iron 2 ion. And if it's a red-brown PPT, you should think about iron 3 ion. So what has happened here is our iron 2 ion has become an iron 3 ion. This is called oxidation. You have not learned this yet, but it's in your syllabus. So that is what we have. So solution Y has iron 2 ion. Okay, for part 2, it's linked to part 1 because the solution Y has sodium hydroxide added into it. Then we have to warm the mixture and test for any gas with litmus paper. This is a test for cation, namely ammonium ion. If ammonium ion is present, what you would see is ammonia gas is produced and the litmus paper will turn red to blue. So the observation would be as follows. As this is only 1 mark, the 1 mark is given when you say the gas turns moist red litmus paper blue. For the next part, part C, this is a test for anion. And this test for anion is the sulfate ion because of barium nitrate and nitric acid. So testing for sulfate ion, and if sulfate ion is present, we would get a white precipitate known as barium sulfate because barium sulfate is an insoluble salt. So yes, we saw a white precipitate. And next, because they say add dropwise until no further change is observed, you do need to state whether the white precipitate is soluble or insoluble in this nitric acid. So white precipitate remains. You can also say no visible change or no visible reaction for the second part. So there is 2 marks, 1 mark for each statement. Okay, for the next part, part D, this is potassium manganate. You have not learned this at this moment, but this is an oxidizing agent. So this is a purple color oxidizing agent. and the purple will turn to colorless. We also say that it is decolorized because it loses the purple color. So remember, if there's a color change, you must always write the before and the after. Okay, so oxidizing agent means what? Means it will change an iron 2 ion to an iron 3 ion. The oxidation state will change from 2 plus to 3 plus. Okay, and next, after that, we add sodium hydroxide, which is a test for cation, and we're testing for iron 3, which is where you get a dark brown precipitate or even a red brown precipitate. Okay, for the last part, we are adding this aqueous sodium nitrite. This is an unknown. Sometimes you'll be given an unknown, and if you are given an unknown, just need to observe what happens. So this is an unknown, and this is likely also an oxidizing agent. So on adding this unknown sodium nitrite, the solution turns yellow, and when you leave it to stand, again you get a brown precipitate. So finally, you're supposed to make conclusion and based on the evidence. So it could be about the substances X and Y, or it could be the ions that they form. So in your question paper, you are supposed to conclude about 4 possible results and give the evidences. So here we have 6 possible conclusions with the 6 evidence. So based on the experiment 2A, you can see that carbon dioxide gas is formed, meaning that carbonate ion is present. So you could write any of these conclusions with the evidence. For the next one is based on experiment 2B part 1, our test for cation. Okay, by our test for cation, we saw a green precipitate, meaning iron 2 ion is present. For the next one, we are looking at experiment 2B part 2, where it talks about ammonia gas being produced as well as ammonium ion being present. So this is 2B part 2. We know that ammonium ion is present because ammonia gas was produced. Okay, and finally, our final conclusion is from experiment 2C, where it's our anion test, testing for the presence of sulfate ion. So sulfate ion is present because a white precipitate was produced. So when you have all these possible conclusions and evidence, the one that I would suggest would always be the conclusions on the cation and anion present in X and Y, because this is very common. So this would be the ones that is good to write.